battle between Octavian and Sextus Pompey was one of the last major battles of the Roman civil wars following Julius Caesar's death. Octavian, Caesar's designated heir, faced Sextus Pompey, one of Pompey the Great's sons, who led the naval fleet in the Mediterranean. This video will discuss that battle. After a tough fight against Brutus in the Battle of Philippi, it was time to divide the spoils of victory. This situation led to a new territorial arrangement among the members of the Second Triumvirate. Lepidus, the weakest link in the alliance, gained command over much of the African regions of the Republic. Mark Antony decided to travel east to Egypt, where he allied with Queen Cleopatra, Julius Caesar's former lover and mother of his son, Caesarion. Besides this, Antony also took command of the provinces and allies of Rome in the eastern Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Octavian took control of Gaul and the Spanish provinces. However, he didn't have much time to enjoy any of it, as he faced a significant problem. Thousands of veterans who had sided with Brutus had now joined the Second Triumvirate. This was both a blessing and a curse, as these troops could easily align with any political opponent of Octavian, if not appeased. Additionally, they were quite demanding, asking for valuable things like land. At the same time, Octavian had to decide where to allocate the tens of thousands of veterans from the Macedonian campaign within the Italian territory. These men had been promised land as settlements, but there were no more government-controlled lands available for distribution. Therefore, Octavian had to choose between two options: either anger many Roman citizens by confiscating their lands, or risk upsetting the Roman soldiers who could form an opposition against him within the heart of the Republic. Octavian chose the first option, an act that affected approximately 18 Roman cities by creating new settlements, with entire populations being expelled or at least partially displaced from their homes. Unsurprisingly, the population didn't take these actions lightly, leading to widespread dissatisfaction with Octavian over the soldier settlements. This discontent encouraged many to side with Lucius Antonius, Mark Antony's brother, who was supported by the majority of the Senate, creating yet another enemy. While this was happening, Rome's power struggles were in full swing. Octavian requested a divorce from his wife, Claudia, sparking another crisis, as she was the daughter of Fulvia, Mark Antony's wife from his first marriage. Octavian, tired of the young woman, sent Claudia back to her mother, claiming the marriage had never been consummated. Fulvia decided to act alongside Lucius Antonius, forming an army in Italy to fight against Octavian in a highly risky move. They had 8 legions under their command, a considerable force. They advanced and initially achieved some victories. However, Lucius and Fulvia overlooked a critical detail. The Roman army still depended on the triumvirs to pay their salaries, and unfortunately for them, they couldn't afford such high expenses. Because of this, the morale of their troops was low, and the soldiers never fought at their full capacity. As a result, Lucius and his allies were eventually surrounded by Octavian's forces in the Perugia region. After a harsh winter, during which their forces were no longer capable of fighting adequately and were running out of provisions, Lucius and Fulvia were forced to surrender in early 40 BC. Fortunately for them, Lucius and his army were spared due to his relation to Mark Antony, who was, at that time, the most powerful and admired man in the world. However, not everything ended well for the conspirators. Fulvia was exiled to a Greek city, and Octavian showed no mercy to the mass of Lucius' loyal allies. The young Octavian decided to take revenge, and on March 15th, the anniversary of Julius Caesar's assassination, he executed 300 senators and Roman knights who had sided with Lucius. Perugia was also sacked and burned as a warning to others. It's worth noting that this bloody event tarnished Octavian's reputation, and several Roman historians criticized him for it. However, this mattered little to Octavian, who believed that displays of strength and cruelty were sometimes necessary to ensure his power was not threatened. Time passed and things calmed down, only to heat up again soon after. This time, the catalyst came from a name Octavian and his adoptive father knew well: Pompey. But it wasn't Pompey, the Great, who had been killed in Egypt after the Battle of Pharsalus. It was actually his son, Sextus Pompey Magnus. Despite holding a position of reasonable prominence, Sextus Pompey had become a renegade general after Julius Caesar's victory over his father. After gaining significant power, he established himself in Sicily and Sardinia as part of an agreement made with the Second Triumvirate in 39 BC. However, he was now the golden goose, causing both Mark Antony and Octavian to compete for his alliance. Octavian secured a temporary alliance with him in 40 BC by marrying Scribonia, the sister of Pompey's father-in-law. Scribonia later gave birth to Octavian's only natural daughter, Julia. Ironically, on the same day he divorced her to marry Livia Drusilla a little more than a year after the marriage. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Mark Antony began an affair with Cleopatra, having twins with her. However, despite enjoying life there, he was worried, knowing that his alliance with Octavian could not last forever and would eventually deteriorate. So he decided to take preventive action. Antony left Cleopatra and sailed to Italy in 40 BC with a large force to oppose Octavian, and tensions quickly rose. However, the crisis didn't escalate much, as the new conflict proved unsustainable for both Octavian and Antony. This was mainly due to the fact that their centurions, who had become politically significant figures, refused to fight due to their loyalty to the Caesarian cause. Meanwhile, Antony's wife Fulvia died from a sudden illness while he was on his way to meet her. Her death and the mutiny of his centurions allowed the two remaining triumvirs to reconcile, at least for the time being. Because of this reconciliation, in the autumn of 40 BC, the two most powerful men in the world ratified the Treaty of Brundisium, aiming to strengthen the Second Triumvirate once more. It was agreed that Lepidus would remain in Africa, Antony in the east, and Octavian in the west. The Italian peninsula was left open for soldier recruitment, something that didn't benefit Antony much. Additionally, to further consolidate the alliance with Antony, Octavian arranged a marriage between his sister, Octavia, and his greatest enemy at the end of 40 BC. Once again, peace was established, but as usual, it wouldn't last long. Meanwhile, Sextus Pompey was gaining more power and decided to threaten Octavian by blocking grain shipments across the Mediterranean to the Italian peninsula. Pompey's plan aimed to cause widespread famine in the territories governed by Octavian. It's worth noting that Pompey's confidence in challenging Octavian was justified, as by that time he had gathered a powerful army and a large fleet of warships. Many slaves and friends of his father, as well as remnants of the Optimates faction, joined his cause, hoping to preserve the Roman Republic, which was rapidly transforming into an autocratic empire. The crowds of slaves who joined Pompey typically came from the villas of the patricians. In short, he wasn't just any opponent. Faced with numerous issues, Octavian decided to negotiate with Pompey. In 39 BC, the Pact of Misenum was signed, lifting Pompey's commercial blockade in exchange for the concession of Sardinia, Corsica, Sicily, and the Peloponnese. But this peace didn't last long. Soon after, the agreement between the Triumvirate and Pompey began to fall apart when Octavian divorced Scribonia and married Livia on January 17th, 38 BC. To further complicate relations, one of Pompey's naval commanders betrayed him, handing Corsica and Sardinia over to Octavian. However, Octavian knew he needed help, as his troops lacked the resources to face Pompey alone. Therefore, an agreement was reached to extend the Second Triumvirate for another 5 years, starting in 37 BC. Octavian also began preparing for the imminent war, ordering his general Marcus Agrippa to start making preparations. Agrippa cut part of the Via Ercolana and dug a canal to connect the Creman to the sea, turning it into a port named Portus Julius. The new port was used to train ships for naval battles. A new fleet was built with 20,000 rowers recruited from freed slaves. The new ships were much larger to carry more naval infantry units, which were also being trained simultaneously. At this point, Marcus Antonius also decided to help, though not out of friendship. For his assistance, he expected support for his campaign against Parthia. Another agreement was then made in Tarentum. Antonius provided 120 ships for Octavian to use against Pompey, while Octavian was to send 20,000 legionaries to Antonius for his Parthian campaign. However, Octavian sent only a tenth of what was promised, which Antonius saw as a deliberate provocation. Despite these problems and differences, they were ready for battle. In July 36 BC, 2 fleets set sail for Italy, while another fleet provided by the third triumvir, Lepidus,